Alright, now some show sim girashin or sasam rism. De and then delia the lobergi timigi ba and the chicorche ma capsha yores. Chisada lobergi timadi and mato and simging or rashin or sasam rism delia, the rashin gi nyomo bitima shuyo mare yomares. Chisada you may want to Loborgi Timigi pa and tip to yours. Chesada Loborgi Timadi and Zugi. That Loborgi Timasi that Dusha shed on Hondong, I Yomo Birik Chasa Loborgi Timas. Chesa Loborgi Timala, the person Gudan Kin, Shen Chila Dene, and Gudan Kin Jitso do Yomo Bati Gores. Chesa Gudan Kin, Gala, Matio Bagi, Yomo Bati Mevares. Meva in Zang, and then Zugi, Simki Rashi Satsam Rixam Day, and Yomo by the Bang do Simi Rajum Rixam Satsam Day, and Namki Tamji Kimbo, Namki Sachagores, Chesna, then Nimbo Gumbi Topi, and then Yomo by the Bang Gores, and did Bang do and then Azuki Simpion Satsam Rixam de Meva Chag Maradi, and then Namki or to Gores, and the sugar decor my shiro.
Good afternoon. This morning we looked at how the nature of the mind, its clear knowing essence, is adventitiously obscured or temporarily obscured by the afflictions. These afflictions, anger, attachment, ignorance and so forth, they are not within the nature of the mind. They are adventitious, which means they can be eliminated. And how can we assert that they are adventitious? Because they arise in dependence on causes. They are dependent arisings, and thereby, through accumulating the contrary causes, they can be eradicated. And when they are completely, the afflictions together with their seeds and imprints, then the clear knowing essence of the mind shines through, and the mind it develops into that of an omniscient consciousness of a Buddha. And in this way, we can establish that Buddhahood is attainable for all of us.
Dine zadang azu simki timadike ane ma pang tuguri besene pang tugures kare lamne delaya an yomo khorong ane kin shenla tin lobur ma da rang shingi kana ma de rang wene nyomo ba de mebare gyudan kin la tin tubtu gores jidan ko gyudan kin de meba soba ina ane nyomo ba kiru mares meba so tugures timati lobo wares lobo wanza meba so tugures Jimsen Jixia, Nijilene, and the Gassane, Timadilia, Nimbo Topta Tempa Yores, Nimbo Topta Tempa Yores, Chisada, Dinzameva Sutugures, Pantugores, on the Nigi in Zada, and Gine, Simki Ranshin, Saware, Simki Ranshin La, and Simki Mo, Sasam Rism de la, Nyomo by your rangi, Nyomo Mashubare, Mashubanza, and Nyomo Pantugres, Nyomo Pantuyagi, Yumzana Masona, and the Denike Sungorwa.
Also, this morning I mentioned 3 reasons why we can be certain that we can completely eradicate the afflictions. So the reasons are that the afflictions are, firstly, as was mentioned, adventitious. And we know they're adventitious because they arise in dependence on causes, and thereby they can be eradicated, being a dependent arising, through developing the contrary causes. Secondly, the nature of the mind, this is free of the afflictions. If it were not, if the afflictions were the very nature of mind, eradicating the afflictions would eradicate consciousness. That is not the case. The clear knowing essence of the mind is unstained, untainted, free of the afflictions. Second reason, and the third, the antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, being supported by valid cognition, this can grow in strength and power exponentially, and therefore can reduce and weaken proportionately ignorance, eventually eradicating it completely. So these three reasons were presented earlier as to show that we can give rise to the omniscient mind of a Buddha.
That in my that is more that Danga Zugi, Yomo Batigio Loboa, Jimati Loboare, Tisuma Pantu ores, Never said you are Yomo Bala, Yamo Totandeba, Yomo Pantu, Kimzendination Baina, and Anzugi Sanji Kovan, top 2 Egi, Kimzen, then Carre said the Anjet, yet some legal weapon. Gyun di mewa suesha baina, sabun di le chibuki nyuwa mena, nyuwa hu marwa. Sabun di le nyuwa kia la gyun barchi gyun di ki pase baina ya, sabun korang la kia ki nyuwa mena, nyuwa hu marwa. Di na xin, nga zu ya nyomong bi gyun nyomong ba di ma mewa suesha baina, nga zu sim di kasa sanyi kubang top tu bi kimzen ka rea siya chik. That samno juwa ro shi le si ruwa da. That didn't ma and that the Kumzeshi or didn't ma.
As has been mentioned several times, the afflictions being temporary, being adventitious, shows they can be abandoned because of arising independence on causes. When that cause is eradicated, the result cannot follow. The famous example is a sprout comes from a seed. If the seed is eradicated, a sprout cannot arise. So therefore, we can have confidence that we can eradicate our afflictions and attain Buddhahood. The text then continues to look at establishing that Buddhahood is attainable for us.
That in ma, and then Yawacha be Gulama and Yakarsungorasine, and then Yawachim be Gulama les. 早上过年出去的，地心你也没去的，地心你也没去的，日月去那旅行那大多上也宁不见是，我都是那种人。
In the middle, just below the middle page 23, His Holiness presents a quotation from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum. Because the bodies of perfected Buddhas are emanated, because emptiness is not differentiated, because sentient beings have the lineages, all sentient beings have Buddha potential.
That in ma, Nizada, Zosan Guni, Trichirda, said Dadelia, Zobe Sanyi Gu, and the Troy Chir said, Gimzen Jixon, Zosan Yigun Trichirdas. That Zobe Sanyi Gu, Troy Chir said that Delia, Dambo, Lucine, and Zugi. 这个卷他们就怕没把学些，安那这个牛毛把可能没牛毛把7牛毛把下那这把没把所有的这个sem的安那开始查个些呢，安那sem可能一些学过些规模有过的是，但sem的等于让些等不住别动你的安那开始查个些呢。 我你个写的，我就过来。现在的早上几呢，出去的初啊，现在俺这个你们都是把那准备好了对吧？那穿要嘛了吧？但你们准备的嘛吧，没把车子，你们为的怕下用我穿用我下用我了吧？现在下用的，那样子你们谁不去查过了吧？问题那些俺就在的，俺这个sem当sem给等于去年你的，在的俺这个来看了有些呢。 罗布给这么的怕境界，鸟毛被搞掉，准备给，但你们搞完哪些就鸟毛把这个冻掉了。其实在年波点就鸟毛把帮用的，俺其实在sem给上些，我稍微可能sem这sem等于南去用我，南去一起去过下去啊。你点给去年的，俺东北用过点的，去年的他，可是我是我你个吃个嘞，其实的鸟毛把这把沙包呢，把下来这个帮用的。 那上有雇佣我有过来噻的，早上就出去噻的，出去噻的，这些送过来。
Let's look at the first line. Because the bodies of perfected Buddhas are emanated. So this term emanated, in different contexts, can be translated as radiate. So bearing that in mind, then an analogy is given here that a sky that is filled with clouds. In a sky that is filled with clouds, the sun struggles to radiate through. But when those clouds disperse, the rays of the sun can radiate through. And this analogy is given for our current state of our mind, which is obscured by the afflictions. But when those afflictions, together with their seeds and imprints, so not just the afflictions and their seeds, but also their imprints or their stains, are completely eradicated completely so that not even a trace remains, then the mind itself becomes the wisdom truth body, which is the omniscient consciousness, and the emptiness of the mind becomes the nature truth body. So the Dharmakaya, or in English, the truth body, has these two divisions. And in the moment omniscience is obtained, then the mind becomes the omniscient consciousness, the wisdom truth body, and its emptiness, its empty nature, becomes the nature truth body. And this is likened here to the clouds having been completely eradicated and the sun being able to radiate through.
조상이 처치 조상이 구 처치를 군이 처치를 당하세 단 조상이 군이 처치에서 대시 아주 녀모 반의 상기 최경호 유래에서 초세야디 아주 님이 원래 찜벌이 원래 님이 여대변의 찜바 당에도 님이 그런 안에 웨팅이 자기를 해야지 디나신 아주 로버기 찜바 바샤의 제가 방용도 안에 최경호 유래에서 해야지 최고 뭐 유고를 이시 동 샘디 최고다 디딩게 안에 동반이 뭐니 유래에서 처치에서 유래에서 디 처치에서 김전직시로 하다 다데네 양 처치에서 해야지 지사데 뭐 최고기 ben에 님의 찜바 당하지 님의 원의 찜바 샤여도 아니 님의 외세데 만줄려 출 샤용 외세데 만줄 추고로 초와서도 외세 수 샤와세로 다 외세 샤지 만줄로 포용 거야. 제가 상이 꾸이기 최고기 틀레딩 만줄 셈젤이야 추고래 해서 셈들 틀레래 셈젤을 주고래 해서 상이 틀레 셈젤을 주고래 초세도 ben에 만줄 대신에 채나 공로야 되네기 가서 로슈파 빠르디 페니데 당고 통고 말아 로슈디는 빠르디 왜디 파 최지 파지데 페니 유디를 주 세부 통용으로 와 어디 나시 상기 유최규기 아니 마저 틀리는 안줄 처지 안줄 틀리 주고래서 안줄 틀리 주고래서다 이시추규가 추규 틀리 주고래 이시추규 틀리 주고래서 상기군요 처치를 자세된 안줄이 상기구 이시기 틀리된 안줄을 초고래서 안줄을 주고래서 올 처치를 돼 안줄을 주고래서 안줄을 주고래서 그래
Continuing with the first line, in particular, the word emanated, because the bodies of perfected Buddhas are emanated. So we can understand this as have, in two ways. The first I've already mentioned, which in the same way that when the afflictions and the seeds and imprints are completely eradicated, then the pure nature of the mind can radiate and the Dharmakaya is achieved. With the Dharmakaya having its two divisions, the truth body having its two divisions, its empty nature being the nature truth body, and the mind itself being the wisdom truth body. So it is able to emanate through, or radiate through, shine through. The second way we understand this term here is that just like when the clouds part and sun rays can shine through and touch us and be of benefit to us, bringing light, enabling vitamin D to be generated in our bodies. In the same way, when a being arises as the Dharmakaya, their wisdom truth body can radiate unobstructed, and the enlightened activities, and the wisdom truth body can engage in enlightened activities benefiting beings. So just like sunlight breaking through the clouds benefits humans, or benefits beings, so too the wisdom truth body that has been able to arise to the complete eradication of the cloud-like afflictions, seeds, and their imprints, that wisdom truth body is able to radiate in through the expression of enlightened activities and benefit beings. So this is the second way we can understand the term emanated. And you can also understand it in the same way that in the dark of night, when you turn on a torch, the extent of the torch's beam it brings light and therefore benefit. So too, the wisdom truth body benefits beings through enlightened activities.
This gari table, Nimi Wegi table, Nimi Wedi table, the Anzola, Supul Poide, then the Jamoro, in the Nimi Western Poide, Subulian, Dredge Kitchen, Delanache, Soatia, Di, Nimi Wegi table chatter, Wangansul Poe, Daddy Nimi Wegi table, Nimi Wegi, Dinashi, Sangi, Chugu, Tinley, and Jugri, said, Sangi, Chugu Digi, and the Queen number 20 Anzul Church. 최신 내가 년바들은 아주 귤라 계획이 계획이야 저러와 디 상이 추기 틀리래 배는 아주 다데 대신에 배네 잠로 셈 귤레기야 잠바기야 닝지기야 자주 셈기야 진비 냠는 쇠배 냠는 차상 상기 20 추기 틀리래다 그래서 상기 20 추기 number na kui number 对俺这里啊确切把了的呢俺这里年纪的这部的个给为是俺这个机构了这上的商业的去给听列是去给这部这上去给听列是去给这部了过过的这上就是商业去给听列身边他们这了出国的就比出国的了对商业一些去给这部给我的身边他们这里给出国的机构的这了他团队的时候的啊，就叫了开会解决了吧？就是确实了啊，变成主管一些去过的，俺这一些去过的，俺这了，隔壁了龙龟那把他了呀，那黑那把经济规定确实，俺这米了呀，米那把经济确实，俺的个这个点点上，第一俺确实被一些去过的。一些去过这个主本，可是困难本那说那下，第二的那个第一个做了确切的俺这个的确的退，第二这边给予给俺们给我给我，第三俺这里给我给，加上第四给我的给，加上第二时候一些去听了的时候的，加上俺这个商业做生意确切的商业给一些去给听了，俺这里九个的时候，俺这里这部的几个的时候了的。
Continuing to look at this word emanate, and emanate can also be translated as irradiate, pervade, or spread. So we understand that the perfected bodies of the Buddha are attained when the afflictions, together the seeds and imprints, are completely eradicated. And there the Dharmakaya is attained with the wisdom truth body being the mind itself and its empty nature being the nature truth body. That wisdom truth body also serves as a cause for the spontaneous enlightened activities of the Buddhas, which can be viewed then as the result of the wisdom truth body. Coming from the wisdom truth body, spontaneously are the deeds of a Buddha, the enlightened activities of a Buddha. And amongst those, most importantly, the Namanakaya, or the emanation body, emanates and teaches beings the Dharma. And then one can see here in this stream of cause and effect, the wisdom truth body lead into enlightening activities being expressed as the Namanakaya, or the emanation body, in particular teaching the Dharma. And therefore, the results of the Dharma teachings, which come about through beings receiving those teachings and meditating on them, contemplating on them in the way the Namanikaya is guiding them, those results of love and compassion, of refuge, of bodhicitta, wisdom realizing emptiness, arising in the continuum of beings, those can be seen as the results of the wisdom truth body, results of the enlightened activities of the Buddha, results of the Namanikaya. So therefore, we see, just like the rays of sunlight, they pervade the world, radiate throughout the world, bringing warmth and other benefits to beings, so too, the enlightened mind, freed of all stains, is able to radiate, spread throughout the worlds, bringing benefit to beings.
Sanji gyur ngāzu sanji tugure nyomo pana sanji pan sanji tugure tubi garsan ngāzu le sanji yu goban toptu yu nuba yores chisa nuba karela ne sanji gi chugu chili gi ma jin namba de ngāzu le chue song yu du di nyamso le bi ngāzu sem di gewe cho gyur tugu do aso chisa di gewe cho de ya gyur gomgu chin ya nuba cher jo ne sanji goban tugu re chisa ngāzu gi sanji goban tuye gi nuba sabon de ngāzu ge yores chisa yobanza sabon yena 긴 창나 누구지기로와 기기로와 제가 긴 창나 누구지 용으로 딘나시 나술에 산지 고번 톱투 얘기 누바 딩아술이 요레스 제가 여바인자 안에 산지 추기 틀레마 지만 샤요도 아니 나술 남든 나이도 디 제소 자징 아주 셈디 개위셔야 누비 쳇쳇줘 두그레스 제가 딘 추체주들 산지 고바 두그레스 제가 되지 녀모모 빵바이네 산지 고바 간스 두그레스 녀모모 빵바이네 산지 고바 두두그레스 아주기 셈딜라 산지 고바 토에기 뉴 산지 고바 규리에 뉴버요레스 디 규마도 바데 녀모바디 까도 바레스 녀모바 메바스는 데니게 셈디 뉴버디 야 산지 고바 산이 차두그레스 제가 아주 산지 고바 토투그레스 산지 토비 김제 가서 가지고 산지 고방 토비기 산지 고방 토에기 최고 공부 토에 니버요레스 제가 니버요 반자 가서는 산지 최고 틀레마 처용도 틀레된 간술이 주그레스도 당아주 셈도 교화다 잠니제다 공제도 모공비도 조투그레스요 봐 진짜 다 조상군이 최실다 하시도 아주 산지 투그레스 산지 투에 가서 니버요레스 인자 산지 최고 틀레 가서 주고 와서 this word that and this word
the enlightened activities of the Buddhas, these we encounter, we engage with them, we have the potential to be not just influenced, but almost infused with the enlightened activities of the Buddha. And it's through our engaging with the enlightened activities of the Buddhas that we can accumulate vast stores of merit. So there's great meaning to understanding this. We have the potential to become Buddhas. And this we can understand, and will come to understand through several points of reasoning. One is by reflecting on how we have the potential to accumulate merit. And that potential enables us to accumulate ever greater stores of merit, the quantity and quality of merit that is required to become a perfected being. And through understanding that a result comes about independent on a cause. And the quality of the result is dependent on the quality of the cause. We can understand that being able to accumulate ever greater amounts, ever greater quality of virtue, ever greater quality of result will follow. And as we not only accumulate virtue, but through this weaken our afflictions, this too aids the accumulation and the strength of virtue. And this comes about through our engagement, our infusing with, our encountering of the enlightened activities of the Buddhas. And these enlightened activities can have such an impact on us because we have the potential to transform ourselves completely, perfect ourselves, becoming a Buddha, and thereby completely eradicate the afflictions together with their seeds and imprints. And this potency within the mind, the potential of the mind, is what arises as the Dharmakaya, as the Buddha.
Sanje Kopan top Tuyaki, Tubiki, Kimsen, Chik Desumore. Adene, that Nibadilla, Deshin year Meshir Dance. Chisada, Sanjing and Sanjo Kopan top to be Kimsen Chik, Deshin year Meshir Dance. Chisan Deshin Ni said, Nazu Sim Rashin to be Tombatina, Sanji Sim Rashin to be Tomba Nidilla, Yawa Cabario Mares, Chisan. More rushing to be tombala, eating more ear make ever memories, Dijin ear measures. Naranzu Gugi, same rushing to be tomba teda, Sanji, same rushing tomba ni Dijin said, need ear memory, cover your ear measures, ear measures.
Moving to the second line. Because emptiness is not differentiated. So this term differentiated can be translated as undivided or indivisible, depending on the context. So let's see where this goes. The meaning then of the second line is that the natural emptiness of our mind and that of the Buddha's mind is not differentiated. They are indistinguishable. There's no difference between the natural emptiness of the mind of our mind and that of a Buddha.
Sem Rashing to be Tomba Tina, Sanji, Sem Rash Tomba, Niga Rang, Mola, Nyomobe, Kasuchiba Meba, and the Dongsan Yimba, Keva Yomalde, Ineda, Gary Keva Yoralamna. Naranzu Sem Rashing to be Tomba Tilla, and Loborgiti make it tip to Yorda. Loborgiti Mazumata, the Shivanaja, Timate Zama Masubanaje, Loborgiti make tip to Yore, Sanji, and a Caso Sem Rashing to be Tomba, Loborgiti made Zama Susarda. That Jig the Zama Susarda, Zama Susarda, Zama Masugati. She's a dini Cabaret Donda Mola, Niga. And then Cabar Memory, Rashi to be on Cabar Memory. In a Caricabar Yorsene, Loborgitima, and then Sanji Simranji to be nobody, then Loborgitima Pasha and Jeba, Mahameva Society. Now the Gugi, Loborgitima, Pasha de Zama Masoji Hadio, Dini Cabar.
The second line, we see that the natural emptiness of our mind and that of a Buddha, that is not differentiated. There is no distinction or difference at all between the emptiness of our mind and that of any Buddha. So the essence of the mind of beings is free of the afflictions, the seeds of the afflictions and the imprints of the afflictions. But that doesn't mean our mind and the mind of a Buddha is identical. The natural emptiness is. But our mind is still obscured by the afflictions. The mind of a being that has become a Buddha was once obscured by the afflictions, but those afflictions have, as well as the seeds and imprints, have been completely removed. The mind has been completely, perfectly purified. Hence, the being has arisen as a perfected Buddha or a completely purified Buddha. So there we see a similarity, that the essence of the minds of all beings is the same. Then there's no difference in the natural emptiness. The difference, though, is that non-Buddha's minds are still obscured by the afflictions.
Chesna lower gidimadi de shoga shabana, lower gidimadi, tombang to be shero combalatine, lower gidimadi mabasugores. Chesna lower gidimad mabasubana, Mazuki sim rashing to be tombatia, and the Sanyi in Hashin Moni Charugore. Chesa Sanyi more sim rashing to be tomba the Moni Gore. Chesa digaras Yembo combi took you lower gidimad mabaso, lower gidima pasha the cheba mabasoba inza, and go Moni Gores. Chesa Mazuki same dear lower gidimadi. Niembo Tombangi to be share of Combalatine, combine the lower gitima, the Meva Charro, Meva, lower gitima, 7 Pasha, the Meva Charro, Meva Chasona, and the Sanyi Chu Rajin, Gasa Moni Gonajin Ansudia, Sim Raj to Tombadia, and Moni Kucha, Chugo Chagores. She's not that Sanyi, go on to you, top 2 year about Gimzenchik Tisumore.
This is one key reason establishing that we have the potential to become Buddhas. And that is that the natural emptiness of our mind and the mind of a Buddha is indistinguishable, cannot be differentiated at all. The only difference between the mind of an ordinary being such as ourselves and that of a Buddha is the presence of the adventitious afflictions. Being adventitious, though, these can be removed. These can be removed. And when they are completely eradicated, the afflictions together with their seeds and stains, then the nature of this empty nature of the mind arises as the Dharmakaya with the nature truth body and the wisdom truth body, with those two divisions. This pure empty nature of our mind that we currently have and is no different from what of the empty nature of the mind of a Buddha, it is that will arise as the nature truth body.
Sanji go top 2 res, to be Gimzenji Garson, and the Rigu Bichir, and Azukila Sanji go Toyaki Rigu res, Rigu Bichirers.
The text continues, presenting a further reason why we can become Buddhas. So the third line, because sentient beings have the lineages.
Rigu Bichir said, Rik said, Azukula, and Maubana Sanji Guyumo. Guregi trading Azugila Yores order, Maubana Sanyi Gumo, Gujokingi, and then Azuki trading Azugila Yores order. Chisadineza, and then go any lower gitimatic Meva Seshabana, Azuki, the Sanji Mo Gures, Chisadan Azugila Sanji Gumo, Gurungi, Azugila Riks Mason Rikta, and the Denigi. Church your order. Dini Zang and Sanjoko 2 grays, Sanji by Nanyam Japan, Sanjoko top 2 grays.
We have the lineage within us that ensures that we have that potential to develop our mind into that of a Buddha and to arise as a Buddha. Through progressive and extensive endeavors, we'll eradicate the afflictions together with their seeds and imprints, and then, due to having the lineage of a Buddha, we will arise as a Buddha.
Da Rigi Bichis, da Sanji Rixed, Jidang Zugi Rixedi, Tia Mambuyor, da Jidana Zugi, Gibi Rixedan, Tamze Rixedan, then Mayor, that Dene Zugi. That's Dangazu that they said the Sanji Rixed, Sigor, Sanji Rix. 상기 릭세들이야 안주기 지양도 갑라 릭들라 예월마서 니용거래 라신 니릭세다 예규 릭세다 라신 니릭세디 니시거래
This term that we have here as lineage, this one Tibetan term rik, has many usages because beings divide themselves in many different ways. So what is translated here as lineage can also refer to class or race or nationality, can also refer to a subject or a kind or a type. So those are two other meanings, in addition then to lineage being a third, and then also Buddha family or Buddha nature. These are all different ways to understand this word lineage. Here we talk specifically about the lineage of Buddhas. And this we can see in two ways, or there are two divisions of Buddha lineage: the naturally abiding lineage and developmental lineage.
예규 릭사 랑신 릭세 니샤고 버 김자가라나 사기 구데라 가소레 원이구다 안에 지게 근데 최고다 수구세 이용으로 와 구들래 근데 뒤지 유구시다 뒤마지 유구세데 구니용으로 와 사기 구려야 근데 뒤지 유구 뒤지 뭐버 인간 구지어로 와 사기 구수디 용어버로 와 유르미다 와로 제가 사이 용어니 롱구다 주구라나 뭐버와 이시추고라는 뭐버와 뒤뒤지 있고래 뒤지 뭐버 인간 꾸디라 숨여르다 롱오니 롱구 주구 아니 이시추고라나 뒤구숨버디 뒤지 있고래 다 오니고 세저와 산지 유예 동방이데 곡된디 디 뒤마치 구르와 오니고 뒤마치 딱바르와 지산 뒤마치 구르와 제산 구데라 산지 구데라 가제 구데라 구 예와 치파 대선 파체와는 니나 뒤지 구다 뒤마치 구 산지 구데라 뒤지 구다 뒤마치 구 니차고르와 수구 동원 수구 이시 추고 이시고선 상이 셈들 셰바데로와 뒤제로와
So the Buddha lineage has these two divisions, then a naturally abiding lineage and the developmental lineage. There's a reason for there being two lineages, and that is because of the bodies of a Buddha, there are those which are uncompounded or permanent, unchanging, namely the nature truth body. And then there are the bodies of a Buddha which are compounded or impermanent, momentarily changing. And these include the wisdom truth body and the rupakaya or the form body. So again, the bodies of a Buddha that are unchanging or permanent or uncompounded are the nature truth body, the one division of the Dharmakaya, and then the other division of the Dharmakaya, the wisdom truth body, as well as the form body, the Rupakaya. These bodies are compounded or impermanent, changing. Hence, there are two lineages, the naturally abiding lineage and the developmental lineage.
꿀레 뒤지 구치다 산이 뒤마지 구 니여와 제가 니여와자 산지 뒤지 구모 규현지다 릭지다 뒤마지 구모 규릭 당아주게 니용고로 제가 나주게 개바게 유릭세다 라신니 릭세다 당아주기데 라신니 릭세디 마오바나 나주 산기베 구거랭고 요선 원이 그 구규라 뒤마지 구모 차르고래 디레 안에 다도 기규 릭세디 가르라나 마오바나 산기기 아니 뒤지 유구 뭐 규행이 최대라 당아줄이야 아니 릭데라 기규기 릭라고래 기규 릭세 제가 릭라 기규 릭당고 라신니를 니샤고베 김자 가르라나 sanji kudile duji kuda dumaji kuni yore 제가 두지 있고 뭐 저한 찍제 제가 간저 상계도 두지 있고 뭐 두미가 더 보러와 제가 두지 있고 뭐 저한데라 아니 기규리 생활하기를 기규리라고 하디 기규리 마음바나 상계도 뭐니고 규야게다 양아들이 뉴바지 가서 뉴바스나 데니체데라 라신이리라고 하래 제가 꿀니요 봐서 니 규야게 규제데라야 니요 보러와다 da karina duji yiku ngo de shi chugo na suku keshe ma duji yiku ngo gyugen de la ane nga su gi la jikte la gegu jik la gore je duma ji yiku ngo gyugen de la ane rashin de jik la gore je.
So the bodies of the Buddha, there is that which is uncompounded, permanent, and there are those which are compounded or impermanent, changing. So therefore there are two lineages. There is the one lineage, the naturally abiding lineage, which is the empty nature of the mind, which, when enlightenment is attained, becomes the nature truth body. That is permanent or uncompounded, unchanging. The other lineage, the developmental lineage, this is what this is what will develop into the compounded, the impermanent bodies of a Buddha.
Dine zada ta ngara zugula deji nganzu deji sheba na shin ngara zuge sem rashin jube tongba sem gi rashin jube tongba ni jiyorwa di kaso rashin ni rikse yorde de tawarwa ngara zuge sem demba jube tongni de la rashin ni rikse yore jesan di maomba na nga zugi sangye towa chayide ngo niku gyugore chesari korang ngo niku gyugore tenza nga zugi sem temba jube tongpe tongni de la rashin ni rik la gore.
It's been mentioned in previous sessions as well as now. Our mind is naturally empty, and this natural emptiness of our mind, which is no different from that of the Buddha, so that was mentioned here in the immediately preceding line. This natural emptiness of our mind is the naturally abiding lineage. So of the two types of lineage, the naturally abiding lineage refers to this empty nature of our mind. And this is permanent, and it is what will be called the nature truth body. When enlightenment is achieved, this empty nature of our mind, which is the naturally abiding lineage and is uncompounded, it will be what is called the nature truth body.
ngara zugi de sem rashi sem korong ngara zugi sem ngo sa zam rik sem chiyorwa sem denigi sem korong karela na giyu rik se chawra giyu rik ta mo ba na ngara sem de karacho sangyi gi gu mo gi go yishi chu du ji go mo yishi chu gu ro wa 제가 ngara sem di 마음바 나가서 상계를 ngara zugi stadi sem di yishi chu ngo gyu gore je du ji gu ngo gyu gore 제자다 ngara zu sem ngara zugi ge sem korong karela yirik di ane gegyu yirik ser gegyu yirik sem di tingi tongni de ane ya rashin yirik saji andi ni di se gore da.
The mind itself, its clear and knowing essence, this is the other type of lineage, the developmental lineage, and it is impermanent, and it, when enlightenment is attained, is what becomes the wisdom truth body, the other division of the Dharmakaya, of the truth body. So we have these two lineages, the naturally abiding lineage and the developmental lineage. The naturally abiding lineage is permanent, the developmental lineage is impermanent. The naturally abiding lineage is what will be, when one attains Buddhahood, is what will be called, the empty nature of the mind, the naturally abiding lineage, is what will be called the nature truth body. The mind itself, its clear and knowing essence, which is the developmental lineage, and impermanent, is what will become the wisdom truth body, will develop into the wisdom truth body.
그래서 아 저기 셈들라 개벌 기규릭라고 기규릭은 개발람나 고 6월 맞아 6월 칭이 야야야야 줘야 되는 개발서 비는 아주 매도를 마서 당부 춘주 열와 디마도 신 매도 샤르도 수 철셔 주고로와 진 개발식으로 네 개발식으로 제산 개발하는 도시네 야야야 6월 칭제 전부 철차야 돼 개발식으로 와 니나신 아주기 셈디 고소를 곰제 냠는 제도 아니 셈데 상비르기 뭐 유야야야 뭐 공부도 공도 폐지네 아니 최탐중 오순도 보이시 뭐 규주고 지단 개바스 개세는 유어진 유어주고 저에 뭐 공에 공도 폐주고 봐서는 그 개벌 규리라고 셈기 땡이 동이디 그 유어져서 가야만 그 딱바르와 그런 유어져면 진짜 될이야 그런 랑신기 아니 그 상기 고방기 뭐 추구 규르마도 얘네 유어 친제 뭐 공배도 친제 드라이메 바래 데 메반자 콜라 라신이 릭사데 아 셈들 게버 규릭라디 가스는고 뭐 권에 권도 폐 유어 친제 드라이어 바자 게버 규릭사데 제가 게버 규와사데 제가 디네 인자 다 저기 셈미팅이 춘이디 라신이 릭마도 예규rik 말해라고 그러다 예규rik 말해서 셈미팅이 춘이 줘와 디 라신이 릭라그리 마도 게버 규rik 말해서 나 셈고롱 게버 규rik 마도 라신이 릭 말해서 다 라신이 릭라도 그 유어균에 줘야 메딩한지 고고로와 유어 줘야 메딩한지 그 기지기지 유어마다 이제 고고로 제가 셈디 예규릭이래서 라신이 릭 말해서 다 셈미팅이 춘이디 라신이 릭에 예규rik 말해서 무슨 거라
These two divisions of Buddha lineage, the developmental lineage and naturally abiding lineage, their names indicate, or the names have meaning. So if we look at the developmental lineage, that which will become the wisdom truth body. So this refers to the mind itself, its clear knowing essence. And this term developmental and developmental lineage shows that the mind itself will develop. Just like if we think of a seed sprouting, a plant growing, then a bud growing, and eventually blooming. This is the process of development. So too with our mind. So our mind will grow and develop. This process is the developmental lineage, growing and developing into when Buddhahood is attained, arising as the wisdom truth body. The other lineage, the naturally abiding lineage, this refers to not the mind itself, but the empty nature of the mind. The mind itself is the developmental lineage, the empty nature of the mind's natural emptiness. This is the naturally abiding lineage. And here the term abiding indicates that it's not changing. The one lineage is called developmental. That shows there's a process of development. The naturally abiding lineage refers to the empty nature of the mind. That is permanent. It does not change. It abides. Hence, naturally abiding lineage. So then an additional term, so the Tibetan journey, or the Sanskrit Dharmata, are translated in English as final reality, but there are many translations. The final reality of the mind, its Dharmata, its journey, this refers to the empty nature of the mind, it's the naturally abiding lineage.
sem rāshīn rīpē, dā ngā tsū sāngyē rīk ngā rā tsū kīla sāngyē rīk nī tuwa rāshīn nī rīk sāyā chī dā nyēgyū rīk sāyā dā nī kā sāngyē rīk sāyā rō dā sāngyē ngā tsū kīla sāngyē rīk yō rī bē sā yō rē lā dā rīk tē lā kācā yō rā sā nī yō rē rāshīn nī rīk yō rē nyēgyū rīk yō rē sāyā chī dā ngā tsū rāshīn nī rīk tē kā rē lā ngā rā tsū kī sem khurāng rāshīn nī rīk rē sā kā sā nyēgyū rīk rē sā dā Semyi tengi tongbani di, chunyi di, ani rangshin nirgires. So, di niga nga su gyula yore, se orwada.
The term Buddha lineage, we now understand there are two divisions, both of which we have. The one is the developmental lineage, the mind itself. The empty nature of the mind, that is the second lineage, naturally abiding lineage.
Dene za da nga zu gyu sem rangshin yu tibyo tongbi tongni de la da da so so ki bo nga zu ne gap de li de le ming ga la sen rangshin ne rik se ming ta go rangshin ne rik se ming ta go re da nga zu gi gom je nyam len je ya ya ru jang shu sem ba pa bi go go ba to yo de de nga zu gi sem rangshin yu tibyo tongba de la da gok den se ming ta go rangshin ne rik re de ine de la gok den le go wa da ko nyomo ba pang de pa nyomo kunda ta kan ro ji pang de da ko den sa cha da de ne ya ji nyomo ba sha da je pang de ani min ka ras na ani mo ni ku smi da wa ja da ko ya sem ra xin yu bi dong ni de la da da nga su su ki bi ne ka lo yue de gen de la ra xin ni rix min da go re da de ne ya ani pa bi ko ba top je ko ba top yo de 안델야 라신이 레데 민 nemba 고텐스 민다 거래 고텐스 다데네 묘모 바샤데 제바 빵이도 상지 귤레레야도 아니 델레 민가라서네 마네 모니쿠스 민다 거래 와다 제가 상지 귤레레도 델레 라신이 글고 말다 고민 라신이 leg 말민 다 모니쿠스 민다 거래 당한도 장주사가 박박 귤레레도 갑라 아니 모니 가서 라신이리야 레그레 ane karsore kokten la niga la chore ta nga zu gula phagbe go ba ma thwe ge so so ke ba nga da an solam ba da jolam nga zu gula so so ke bi gula ye de gen dige go ne de la tong ni de la semiting chu ni de la ra shin ne rik si ji bu ming ji bu ma de yo ma da da ko ne la ma so na ming ji ma ko ne ni si me ro da ko ming da de ming de je ba jap tu do de ji 모라 라신 주베 동베 동이 들라 고 캬파가 두고 말데 이내 민다상 들라 봐 제가 두고 오르와다 장주sem바 파바라 이마 네 장주sem바 파바데 딩아 장주sem바 파바라 계셔
Of the two types of lineage, let's look now just in this segment at the naturally abiding lineage. So the naturally abiding lineage, we've heard, refers to the empty nature of our mind, and that empty nature of the mind is no different or is not differentiated with the empty nature of the mind of any Buddha. And it's permanent and therefore unchanging. So bear that in mind, that this the permanent, unchanging nature of the mind, the natural emptiness, is called by different names at different times. So here, I'll go through the different names that the same object is called at different times. And bearing in mind, the empty nature of the mind, the object, it doesn't change, it's permanent. But it is known by different names depending on the quality of the being. So the empty nature of the mind is something that all beings with mind possess. All ordinary beings, all non-Buddhas, possess the naturally abiding lineage. So that's then the first name for the empty nature of the mind. When an ordinary being such as ourselves applies oneself earnestly, repeatedly over a sustained period, we will attain a path. And eventually we'll attain an inferential realization of emptiness, conjoined with bodhicitta, continuing to practice the perfections. We'll realize emptiness directly, and we'll arise as an Arya Bodhisattva. From that point, or in the moment of arising as an Arya Bodhisattva, the empty nature of our mind, which thus far has been called the naturally abiding lineage, will continue to be called the naturally abiding lineage. It will also be called a true cessation. And every subsequent true cessation will refer to the empty nature of the mind. Then we continue to apply ourselves earnestly, progressing through the paths of seeing and meditation. Then, when we arise as a Buddha, the empty nature of our mind is no longer called the natural abiding lineage. It is now called the nature truth body. So here we see a progression of terms, of names, imputed to the same object, the empty nature of the mind. For all non-Buddhas, it is called the naturally abiding lineage. For Arya Bodhisattvas, it will also be called, it is also true cessations. And then for a Buddha is not said to have the naturally abiding lineage, but that same object, the empty nature of the mind, that is permanent, unchanging, is called the nature truth body.
Dadi dusu zosa vechele ko jema meba chayde surpasimi tagirwa. Midi jirar mado mila ne kebaska mero mi jirare de ine malang kalwa mingji hore mado kole premise ze güne toya yoma. De di topsane milchita. De sarasane ya surpasimi ta. 민카다 미치와 디나시 나도 라신의 셈게 라신 주변 또 돈이디 다들 안주게 파비 고방 마토비 강이들라 라신이 지부마도 생각야 매민도 다 파비 고방 토요도 안들야 고대야서 내가 뭐 바차대자 빠이도 된 뭐니고 세대 민디 다다 가가 다용도 어디로 시리다
This we can liken to perhaps our own experience in different contexts, but let's take the illustration of a certain individual called Anthony Albanese. So he, for perhaps many years, maybe many decades, he saw himself as a potential prime minister. But no one called him prime minister. Then, in dependence on accumulation of a vast number of causes, probably several million of them, he became suitable to be labeled prime minister. So in dependence on accumulation of particular causes, he became suitable now, for the first time, to be labeled prime minister. Being a dependent arising, this situation is not permanent, but it changes momentarily. And there'll be a time when he's no longer suitable to be labeled prime minister, but only former prime minister. So this is similar here. We had this one person, Anthony Albanese, going through a progression of stages in his career. He remained Anthony Albanese, but at some point he was called a politician, a leader of the opposition, the leader of the nation, and later will be a former prime minister. This is similar to the empty nature of our mind. We all have the empty nature of the mind from us as ordinary beings as well as the Buddha. For us ordinary beings, it is called the naturally abiding lineage. For Arya Bodhisattvas, it's called both the naturally abiding lineage and true cessation. When the Arya Bodhisattva arises as a Buddha, it's then called also a true cessation, but the nature truth body. So the same object at different times is suitable to be labeled differently.
Dodi moda da nan yedi ro. Chisa de to khron rugu mare ko ta de de yor de ne 그런 요새 댄색이 시 모자데 파 두고 요번자 안에 모자데 가와 레세들라 더데 레디거와 제가 모자데 메론레도 더데 메론 레사로와 그런 마조베네 어디나시 아저기게 심라신이 주변 동배 동이디 그런 오 공부도 편에 직조하지 하 말데 아저기게 셈 그런 게 댄색이 시 셈디 디 냠는지도 야옹 공부도 봐 야야야 친절이 아니 다들 아주게 람마레 디 셈딩 셈도 직 아주 냠는지도 람용어지 람용어에 단 셈디야 공부도 파비기 팔람용어차 내내 팔람용어차도 네 디딩게 셈기 춘이들 민 곡단세 민 내용을 다디네게 셈딩 아주 셈디야 팔람디 뭐 공부도 공부도 거도 펼제 근데 남긴 오 차도 녀모바 차선다 빵제 남긴 오 차도 디 셈이 등에 중요điểm 아니 뭐니고 설명다고 제자리 뭐서 셈디 고 검제 냠는지도 또바 권에 야야야 권에 펼주고 제가 권에 권도 펼 야야리도 네 셈들이야 셈이 등에 라신 중요디야 고셈 가와줘서들이야 델레디고 제가 디네자 셈 거란 남기 오 차도 안 디딩이 중요디 뭐니고 세샤서 자송이다 셈이 등이 중요디 뭐니고 자송으로 와 셈 거로 이시 주고 차도 대시 셈데다 모자니디 베샤 모자나 돌루버지도 되다데 모니게 베샤 진짜 모자 조도 셈 거로 도디 마조다 모자 조도 모자 가올레스들 도디리고로 디나시 셈 거라신 주베 동베 동인디 오 공베 공네 공도 페드 마조베네 셈 거로 디 딘시 셈 거로 아니 오 공네 공도 페지 야리도 셈 거로 남긴 오 차도 디딩의 중이디 모니고 자르고래
Use another illustration. If a large rock is placed in a truck, that rock will go wherever the truck happens to travel to. And the rock itself is not doing anything, it's not changing, it's not moving. Rather, the truck is doing the heavy lifting, is moving from one place to another. So too, with the empty nature of our mind. Wherever our mind goes, so too is the empty nature there, permanent, unchanging. The mind itself, this develops and grows. And as the mind develops and grows, the empty nature, despite not changing, will be known by different names. Right now, only the naturally abiding lineage. When emptiness is directly realized by a bodhisattva, then the empty nature, the final reality of the mind, is known not only as the naturally abiding lineage, but as a true cessation, and as now it's just left. It's okay. I said it before. It's just left now. And then, as the bodhisattva continues to develop, and they come to completely eradicate the afflictions together with the seeds and imprints, and arise as a Buddha. The empty nature of the mind, the final reality of the mind, is now no longer known as the naturally abiding lineage, but is known as the true cessation and as the nature, truth, body. So therefore, the empty nature of the mind, this does not change. The mind itself, though, develops.
상기 고방 토역이 누가 여러 가지는 상기 리뷰를 해야지. 나 리틀 가서 라신일이 된 기기 릭세야지. 다디 저기 다디디 라신일이 된 기기 릭세야지. 다디니 라신일이 때 동반일래샤 안에 기기 릭세데 셈래샤디. 다장아저 땡규바다 우마 랑규비 시다를 송다래. 땡규바다 우마 랑규바 랑규비 송다래. 디 때문에 양지 셈잠바당 양지게 어머니 제라마도데 발라스베 릭세데 양 뜻자당 카하레 안치 리규비 치르세데 릭디 기쇼다 데가도 릭기규 릭다 라신 릭세디 라신이 동반인의 시기에서 두시에서 디 숭타디 가리레는 좀다마와 아니 제라 가서 튕규바다 우마 튕규바다 우마 랑주비 숭타레스 다셈자비기 릭세디 야 라신디 릭세디 아주 동반이래 샤기 말해 아니 제라마와 노리 발레디 샤기 말해 야 샤다시 그런 가가 샤기래.
What I've presented here is the presentation on the Buddha lineage according to the two Madhyamaka schools, Prasangika and Svatvantika. Chittamata have their own presentation, and the Vaibhashika and Svatvantika also have a differing presentation.
제자들 딜레야 김제 숨숨고래 가서네 대시 나한테 상기 고방 토부리 토비가 김제 가려서네 나한테야 상기 고방 토에 이시주 틀리 주고래서 조사기가 처시다서 틀리 주고래 나한테 누바요래서 직제 나한테네 나한테 상기 고방 토부리 가서네 상기기 심란신 주비 동바다 나한테 심란신 주비 동바니래 개발요 말해서 김제 직제 다 김제 숨바들라 아주 상기 고마 토투를 가서 아주 길라 상기 리거레스 지산 릭 상기 릭세도 상기 고마 뭐 규run기 아니 뉴버 가서 규run기 최요레스 여러와 리거레스 지산 아주 상기 뭐 규run기 제마오바나 이시추고 차요하게 다들 최딩 아주 길라 요레스 리거레스 제자당 아주 상기 고마 토그레스 토비 김제 가래야서 아니 상기 아주 상기 리거레스 and the Saji Simbiranjin Maruba and Simbiranjin to buy more Yelmeres. Jim said, Sumbadilla and a Saji Chubu Tinde Yishing out of the Jubu Tinde Jugures. This sum you tone answer the Sanji, Sanji, Gopan, top to big, and the Jimsen Sumure.
Here, three reasons have been presented as to why we can achieve Buddhahood. And again, these we've gone through slowly, so that you can be clear on them, to give you confidence in your practice. So the first is that we have the potential for the enlightened activities of the Buddhas to enact with us, to engage with us, to influence us, to transform ourselves. That was the first reason. The second is that the empty nature of our mind and the mind of all Buddhas is identical, is not differentiated. And then the third reason is that we have Buddha potential. We have these two lineages. We have Buddha lineage rather, sorry. We have these two lineages. The one, the naturally abiding lineage, which will arise or will be suitable to be called the nature, truth, body, and the developmental lineage, with the mind itself, which will develop into the wisdom, truth body, the omniscient consciousness. So these three reasons have been presented in the first three lines.
and the Nyamboyore says that Odusine, China, Tipchi, Tipti, Timadi, Mevasue, Tuguries, Chim, De Mevasena, Sanyo, Charugres, Sanyo top Tugres. And that Anzugula, Sangi, Mount by Sangi Chag, Nuba, Damason, Sangi, Yurungi cheating Anzugula, Yores, Yobanzang, Sayo top Tugres, Anzo Sangi Goban, top Tuyegi, Gumsela de la Sangi. Riki Gimsen Chikche. And then Manzo that Bashi Garza Yomo be Tibati Gaudiana, Yomo Tibati Chasa, Pontu by the Gimsen Chikche, Chazan Gimsen Yutone, Manzo Sanjoko to the Sachi, Odo Simura.
Those three reasons, combined with what we heard this morning, further reasons for us to gain confidence that we can attain Buddhahood. Namely, the afflictions are not in the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind, we've heard, is empty. It's no different from that of the Buddhas. The afflictions, rather, are adventitious. They are temporary, and therefore they can be eradicated. They come about in dependence on causes, and through avoiding certain causes and accumulating others, the afflictions can and will be removed. Not only that, the second reason given this morning is that the antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, being in accordance with the nature of the mind, can be, and therefore supported by valid cognition, can be developed exponentially. And as the wisdom, our wisdom realizing emptiness grows in strength, it weakens and eventually eradicates proportionately or sequentially the varying levels of strength of our afflictions, in particular ignorance. So for these two additional reasons, that the afflictions are adventitious and that the antidote can be developed in strength exponentially, we can add those two to the three already mentioned in this verse and gain confidence that enlightenment is attainable for us.
Gabriel yoba Gabriel meba kare mare chisa gedi ne sangi yu mo gyurungi nubadi ngazu gi yoyo bare sangi rik yoyo bare dado sangi ingbo che sido ngazu sangi yu ko bon thodu gi rik de ngazu gedi de yoyo bare chisa ngazu sangi ingbo che le sangi ko bon mo gyurungi ningbo nubal ningbo de ngazu le che de yore so chisa semjen kan de chi ne da nyawa yida dunjo la mi and jike janju semba and kanashine sama yebi gansa kanashine this chazala sanji yu gobon drup tuye ki rikyo ba za sanji ningbo jenles.
In the fourth line, all sentient beings have Buddha potential. So here we see in both the third and fourth line the term sentient beings. This then refers to all non-Buddhas. All non-Buddhas, without exception, whether they are languishing in the intense suffering of the hells, or as spirits, or as animals, humans or gods, all beings who are not Buddhas have Buddha potential. Well, a synonym for Buddha potential is Buddha nature, or Buddha lineage, Buddha essence. All beings have this. All sentient beings have Buddha potential. And it's not something that comes and goes or needs to be created. At all times, all sentient beings, without exception, have this potential to become enlightened.
Nyamne de yaga chira zunju cheje nyuba cheje nyamne chigyo ne digi nyela sanyi tobru gure ane jeke juge denige jiki nyamne maje wache yobene ne ko togu marwa bene ngazo sabin mangbu chena sabin chasan nyugu ki nyuba chiyore de ine ane nyugu sunyele kigri labde sabin de sawal bene kin chulu chasan aji sunyele sang nadi de kigri mado ma ane salamadap che josogala sha bene 로가지 샤베나디 뉴기야스요 말에 그래서 산나를 비해셔베나디 긴 추다 류디게 상면에 뉴비기도 말에 제가다 데니게 마답지 긴 추류 차상 약보지 수유 약보 제베네 뉴구디 교화기에 제보 교화민 되고 디나신 아주기게 아주게 소수기 다대시 녀모 봐야 녀모 때야 냠는 제기 림바디 아주 수유 그 직전에 야가 제고서 배주 제베네 아주 상이 이해를 고방 토야디 다디 개발디로 와.
Just like if one has a collection of seeds, which of these will grow first is hard to say. But the ones that will grow first will be those that are cared for better. So if some of the seeds are left on the table, we know they're going to be the last ones to grow, if at all. And amongst those that are planted, those that are better nourished by warmth and moisture, and in a better quality soil, they will grow first. And similarly, amongst beings, it's difficult to say, whilst all sentient beings have the potential to become Buddhas, it's difficult to say which will be the ones who first fulfill that potential. It really depends on the accumulation of causes. And it's up to each sentient being themselves to accumulate those causes. And this comes about primarily in dependence on the accumulation of aspiration and enthusiasm to apply themselves to accumulate the causes that eradicate all stains and that allow all good qualities to arise.
ane sem korong ane ki yurik chagre sa chikla de da delia yang jiwa chili gore da ne nga jugi dongban yi se chue tamji de yoro wa dongban yi de jisan da dösha kongzhuo nga jia marikba nyomo ba dösha rangxin zhibe dongbe dongyi de rangxin ni re mare se jiwa li gore dösha rangxin zhibe dongbe dongyi joro wa di rangxin ni re be mare kongzhuo rangxin zhibe dongbe dongyi de ane nyomo ba kanrishna di dinga rangxin zhibe dongbe dongyi de ane rangxin ni re mare rangxin ni ina mawo ba na di ngo ni gu ju go ro wa gyur tu gure tu mar asa de oda di tu wali gore dan len je yuri shin de da dang bo jiwa din de yong go res do ba la ma son de ne yong go res ase dang bo di ma shu shi.
So doubt can follow. Hearing that the mind itself, which can be developed, is therefore the developmental lineage, whereas the empty nature of the mind, the final reality of the mind, this is the naturally abiding lineage. So someone will say, but take the afflictions, attachment, anger, and so forth. Are they not too naturally empty? Sure. If they are naturally empty, then are they not suitable to be called the naturally abiding lineage? And therefore, they will also eventually be suitable to be called the nature truth body. So such a doubt may arise.
Ta jisanda dinigi dokolde de dangan du samdang de karchirasne nyomo ba karchine nyomo ba tinge rashing du beton yi di ekasore rashing ni mare la orda rashing ni mares nyomo ba tinge rashing du beton yi di 동이 레마도 그 라신들이 말해서 뭐바나 디 안에 뭐니고 차야기 고가 비와 말해 뭐니 용 말해서 뭐니 유 말해서
whilst everything that exists, including all consciousnesses, including afflictions, are empty of natural existence or existing by way of their own nature, the afflicted minds are not suitable to be called the naturally abiding lineage and are not suitable to be understood as developing into the nature truth body, or sorry, not developing into, being suitable to later be called the nature truth body.
디가르람나 되샤당 콘로디게 모고니 공도 폐세 아니 그 남긴 제거 말해. 로와 되샤도 콘로디게 모고니 공도 폐세 남긴 차요 말. 지사 되샤 콘로 모 공배도 좀 마저완자 모라나 루시베 도디 줘요 말와. 대시 배치하러 모자나 루시베 도디 가와 모자 가와로스 리그레스 모자 존 리그레스 리고로와스 코로 마로바나 모자 조 리고로와 모자데 마로나 다가되네 도대야 다가를 되되마도 메르와 지사 디나시 콘조다 뇽모 버릭티 차사 모 고네 고도 폐제 아니 나데 가서 콘조다 뇽모 바제 디야 곰제 아니 람모차 디는 람중오차네 남킹오차 디는 차여 버선 디요 말레스 그래서 뇽몽바디 녀보된지 매바서셔 거로와 콩조 디기 녀보된지 매바서 딘진디게 아니 돈이도 베셔라 곰제 코 매바서셔 거로와 매바서셔 완자 코야 공대전에 산 남킹오차 매바래 공오 남지 차 매바자 코디게 란시도 돈이데 원이고 차여 말해 매바자 제자 라신디리 말레스 제자다 뇽몽베게 셈취 세셰바 가르시나 디 아니 기규식 말해서 뇽몽베게 셈 가르시베나 대수 차사 기규식 말해서 공네 공도 표시 남기 뭐 차투 말해 진짜 기규식 말해 산이식 말해 돼서 진짜 디 마연장 코론 기규식 말해서 디 띵이 춘이디야 rashi ngoniku kasa rashindiri mare ngoniku jugu mares jesa dinesa nyomon bigi sem nyomon ba kanyin badi rigmar sangi rigmare di tingi chungi dia sangi rigmare jesa rashindiri mare sekti sawa
To repeat first the two types of lineage in relation to the mind. So the mind itself, what grows it grows and develops, this is the developmental lineage, and will eventually develop into the wisdom truth body. Its empty nature is a naturally abiding lineage, and whilst abiding and not changing, just like the rock in the back of the truck, will later be suitable, when enlightenment is attained, to be called the nature truth body. So here we hear that the mind is suitable to develop into the wisdom truth body, and therefore it's called the developmental lineage. What about the consciousness? A consciousness that is an affliction, attachment, anger, and so forth. This too is consciousness, a mind. Its nature is empty, it is naturally empty. It doesn't exist by way of its own nature, but is empty of existing by way of its own nature. So there seems to be some similarity. Can the empty nature of an affliction be called the naturally abiding lineage? And the affliction itself, that mind itself, be called the developmental lineage? So that is the doubt that someone may have. So the final reality, the dharmata of the mind, its empty nature, is the naturally abiding lineage, and will later be suitable to be called a true cessation, and eventually the nature truth body. But whilst the afflictions are naturally empty, and are naturally empty, and there's no difference between their emptiness and that of the mind itself, because the afflictions themselves cannot be developed into the wisdom truth body, into the omniscient consciousness, but in fact are rather progressively weakened and eliminated by the cultivation of a path, there will be no affliction that can arise as the nature truth body, because they will have been eradicated, or rather no nature of an afflicted mind that can arise as the nature truth body, no afflicted mind that can arise as the wisdom truth body, because they will have been eradicated. If the afflictions were to become part of the omniscient consciousness, the afflictions would be a path, and they would develop into the path of no more training. But of course they eradicated before that. So therefore, the empty nature of the affliction cannot arise as the nature truth body, because the affliction itself is eradicated before the attainment of the nature truth body. And similarly, the affliction itself, whilst mind, is not included or not suitable to be called the developmental lineage, because it cannot develop into the omniscient consciousness, cannot develop into a path, but is rather eradicated by a path.
소상기고 최실다 세대 조배 상이 주기시 틀량한서 주고래 세대 재산 틀리딩한서 주고래 세대 다도 전에 시행되고라 다 손도 안 주기라 삼다데 안 주기라 가려 열었으네 상이 최라 대바 최지리기 된이 된바 안 주려 시알야 지게 누버 치숑을 빠베게 안 주 시알야 제외 삼바다 아니 지게 잠제 삼바 아니 전주에다 차상 유에도 계획이 되는게 아니 류가 예수님이 예주 돈비기 아니 수림라서 바다 디바 지금에 삼을 디차상 개화라바 디차상 상이 틀려래 제사당 안 주길라 상이 틀려 상이 이시 주기 틀려 주되어 예되어 바다 다시 다른 안 주기 냠네 가지 공부 따베네 디수야 관이 배다 따야 인상 안 주길라 상이 이고 방토야기다 뉴벌 마스노 예되어 상이 이용 아니 틀려 이시 주기 틀려 안 줄려 예되어 봐 디네 인자 당 안 주기네 근데 무디제 아주 냠는 제바 있나 다 달바다 탐지긴 비고 고방이야 토야기다 아주 람갈 마소나 디 초소 리트가서 책으로 봐 디네자 당 아주기 소수기네 당 나이데니티니 지위에 선배당 소소라랑기 소소 뽑기야다 근데 무디지인 세비게 듬보 공부했다야 지선당이 냠는 제바네 다 상주 고방 톱 투구여 봐디 다 디나데 이 가상다 디린 셰바디기 미유 녀모가 빵 투구거래 가서 년부 dob된 공부야 요레스 안에서 아주기 셈길이야 안에 상주 구용어 주름이 리그요레 지사다 소소라는 게 배순지 제바이나 다 디네 지 투구도 다 나랑기 디린 나도도 지기어 배하고래 셈비기 소소 가와 공부하다 소수기 때 무지능이 디디는 냠네 지기 셈비게다 아주 차상 데네 삼다제 아주기다 배수 제화의 기침 최고래. 디네자 당아도 조로시다. 냠는 제다데 전에 당아저게 조다 아주 타바 침비 냠는 지하스네. 다 지게 랑다 시엔 차사 누항을 타고 오래 지난 대화디 고고래 디기 고고래 디네자 셈제 탐제래 대화데 되나 셈비 잠제 공미하다. 셈제는 누항나 자나 셈비 니제곰. 지나다 소소랑랑기 셈제기 딩 누항 세다 디기투에데 니 지기스 제사다 제발라 가르고스네 디시셰바네르 바자 그 콘솔이야 탑람 둥아 디기투에게 탑라 람 냠네 림바바 랍셰캡 아니 녀모 빠야기 녀보디기 디네레스 바 덴제 생이 둥아세 디기투에 디체우도 디제발라 소소라나 마신나 안제투야미도 제사다 소소라나 신의 디인장이 셈제 탐제기도 하나 산지고 마마토 탑미도 세비 산지고 마토버쇼 세비 디 공부하는 당아주 잠니지 공 자주심 하산 남대고 자주심 공부하는 당아주 그 냠는 지고다 냠는 산주 공부 토에 규디 아주 사이고디야 아주 야네 야도 삼다야다 안디가라 대가주 돈이고 셰데 최 간듯이 힘네 규다기 현실을 뛰는 주바마도 현来마도바 랑공원의 주된 싸우기는 매 선비게 삼로 다제 야네 야도 두스콤이야 다 전에 대비 김선들의 야네는 제바지야. 또 삼다베나 당아주기 제니기 제바제 된데 삼다 동이 삼다이도 녀모버 빠야게 년보된 아주를 장도를 시고래. 제산 로브이 지마디 마메가 소야 탑시던 거. 제산 잠닝제다 자주심 고모도 상기 이슈 뭐 규정기 뉴바디 아주야 공부를 딴 거. 제산 디네자 도시는 아주기 다 가사다 디링기 롭센디 아주 즉 조용하도 두스전에 삼당어대 공고야디 아주 차상하다 노도스전에 게 침보샤거로 봐 얼랍샤라 선티레다 칠레 사이 칠레어지 제가 상기이만 최 송정아도 뒤최 신제의 틀레 내게서 틀레 제부도 틀레라는 이시축을 제부로와 지금 이시축을 깨봐로 이시축이 틀레를 해서 오다 제부를 해서 우리 이시 제부
To summarize what we've been looking at in this and the previous sessions this weekend is that, as we saw in the first line of this verse from Maitreya Sublime Continuum, because the bodies of perfected Buddhas are emanated, that was the first of the three reasons presented here for why we can become Buddhas, which is that we have encountered the enlightened activities of the Buddha. We have and are engaging with the enlightened activities of the Buddha. All the virtue on our mind, or the virtue of the minds of the Dharma that have been generated within us, are the results of the enlightened activities of the Buddhas. For example, the faith or trust on our continuum, our aspiration, our yearning for spiritual development, our wish to be of benefit to others, our love for others, our compassion for others, our joyous perseverance and enthusiasm, our ethics. These are all virtuous minds of the Dharma and are results of the enlightened activities of the Buddha. From this, we can take confidence in the transformation we've achieved and will continue to achieve, knowing that we are being engaged with, are being guided by the Buddhas. And all these virtuous minds, of whatever strength they are now, they were once weaker than they are. but through our endeavors have developed to their current strength. And in direct relation to our ongoing endeavor, they will grow further. So the greater our enthusiasm and our effort, these virtuous minds we have will develop. Eventually, we'll develop them to the state of perfection. And as a perfected being, a Buddha, will be able to be of greatest benefit to others. So in this way, we saw already in the first line, liberation and enlightenment is possible for ourselves. Taking that, the other two reasons presented and those this morning, reflect on these again and again to give yourself courage, deep inner strength. Because this is what's needed, in particular from what I presented this morning, where I gave a detailed encouragement on how to meditate, or what on to meditate, so that we can enter into the Dharma and radically transform ourselves. To bring about this initial change takes courage. Courage to turn away from a habitual way of thinking and to develop a new way of thinking, to engage with the world in a new way, not to be deceived by the pleasures of samsara. And we need this confidence to know that I can become free of attachment. I can become free of anger. This anger or resentment or jealousy or attachment, when it rises in me, it's not who I am. It's adventitious. It's come about in dependence on causes. It's not who I am. I can eradicate this. My desire for worldly pleasures, the delight for worldly pleasures that dominates me so, this doesn't have to remain the case. I can turn from this. But to have the strength of mind to do so continuously, which is essential for change to come, requires confidence. Therefore, reflect on your Buddha potential. Engage in the meditation that I laid out in detail this morning. I won't repeat it now. But as you develop that foundation, use it as you're entering into the door of the Dharma to reflect on the state of others too. What we're trying to do here is have our mind focused primarily on our own mental state, using mindfulness and vigilant introspection, to guard our mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions. And rather than pointing at the faults of others, transform our own way of thinking. And as we gain experience of that, be aware of the suffering of others and develop love and compassion for them, but not a critical attitude towards them. Understanding that they are suffering due to the dominance of the afflictions, just like we are. So our focus is on eradicating our own afflictions, on ensuring that we go through life with as pure motivation as we can, a motivation freed from influence by the afflictions. And when our attention turns to others, it's with love and compassion for them, wanting to engage with them in a way that is gentle and kind, understanding that they are suffering, understanding that they, at the moment, have no path before them for freedom. They're lost and confused. And with a gentle attitude, engage with others. So in this way, through engaging in the meditations, as mentioned this morning, coming to understand samsara and the sufferings therein well, as well as the potential that we have to attain liberation and the benefits of liberation and the omniscient state, we can have confidence that through this training we will develop experience of the path. And this is essential to be able to benefit others. Merely having a vast store of knowledge, whilst this is beneficial for others, means the way we can guide them is really quite limited. We have to gain experience of the path and transform ourselves. And as you develop ever further, what we've been studying in this text, that of emptiness and dependent arising, include this in your thoughts. Everything that you encounter is impermanent, which means it's arisen in dependence on causes. Changes momentarily, which means it has parts. And it requires labeling by mind. For all these reasons, it therefore doesn't exist by way of its own nature, but is empty of existing by way of its own nature. So just that I mentioned, very simple. You all know what it means because you've heard this presented in detail many times. Have that dominant in your mind, not the worldly concerns that now dominate one. And then lastly, I encourage you again, that foundation that I presented this morning, develop that within you in a way that is strong and stable. Because then your aspiration to be of real benefit to others, and your aspiration to gain freedom from pain and misery and guide others to do so too, can be achieved. So thank you very much. We are a little over time. But if you have questions, then feel free to ask. Okay, then thank you. And then I think we meet again in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much.